New York City and the state chose to use multiple millions of dollars worth of resources instead of stopping crime. Instead of that, they did a show of force. They said, no, this is a fascist police state, actually. So let's talk about it. First, we'll get started off with the overall violent campus clashes, okay? Now, obviously, if you guys were in here, as many were, covering this in real time, last night or over the course of this past week, you saw a very different narrative being presented in the media than what was actually going on. I interviewed the CUAD students. I went to an encampment at UCLA. The pro-Palestinian encampments have very clear-cut demands and are pretty reasonable overall. And all of these students are actually exercising their First Amendment rights. Free expression, free speech. It's supposed to be constitutionally protected. These are students who themselves are, as a matter of fact, learning these lessons from these college campus. The college education that they're getting is teaching them that values such as genocide, ideas like genocide, actions that are genocidal are bad and wrong. So, of course, if you're a student and you learn that, you're like, okay, well, I see what's going on in front of me, and I don't want my tuition dollars to go to the funding and facilitation of genocide. Perfectly valid, perfectly reasonable. There is a long history of students always being on the right side on issues such as this one and always engaging in radical campus protests. Okay? And almost always throughout American history, these students have been called communists, radicals, outside agitators, have been violently suppressed. Now, having said that, for the past week or so, for the past 2 weeks, okay, American media in general, comprised of these psychopathic right-wing adults, have been begging across the board, across political ideology, across boundaries, across whatever your personal flavor of politics is, has been in unison, collectively screaming from the rooftops to do a Kent State on these student protesters. Why? For the crime of not loving Israel hard enough, okay? If you say something bad about Israel in the United States of America, we will kill you. We have to kill you. You need to die. You need to die right now. We need to call the police and kill you dead. They've been begging for this, begging. And because the student activists broadly, in a surprising way, have demonstrated phenomenal messaging discipline and have actually portrayed themselves as best as they possibly can, as pacifist as they possibly can in the face of counter-protesters, agitators, and even police presence and police intimidation, the media didn't have a lot of reason to be able to point to go, this is why you got to kill them right now. But that didn't stop them from demanding that the police come in and pack these kids up anyway. That's why they tried to hyper-focus on whatever they could. Sometimes counter-protesters would agitate, and there would be a little bit of a scuffle, and people would go, see? Clashes occurring on college campuses because of the pro-Palestinian side's rabid anti-Semitism. They lied for weeks about anti-Semitism on campus when they were demanding that Jewish anti-Zionists get packed up with the rest of the anti-Zionists. They went as far as to blame it on students not fucking enough, like Scott Galloway said that. Charlatan, a fraud. And then yesterday, Columbia students were unjustly suspended in the midst of these negotiations, these fake negotiations with the university. They were unjustly suspended. Some of the students weren't even at the encampment. They were in class. Suspended for what, you might ask? Suspended for suspected pro-Palestinian sentiment, of course. They were suspending Palestinian students. Incredibly racist. I don't know how else to describe it. So, of course, the students did historically what they've done time and time again. They took over Hamilton Hall, almost to a T, almost exactly to the same date. Columbia students have a long history of taking over Hamilton Hall to further continue their protests. This is a part of the history of the school. It is directly on the website of the school. So the students took over Hamilton Hall and renamed it Hind Hall, named it after Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old Palestinian who was executed by the Israeli state, who famously called for an ambulance, and then the ambulance and the medical team that tried to get to her was also shot at by tank artillery. And yet they said, well, a couple windows were broken in an effort to get into Hamilton Hall, and there's outside agitators that are actually that have taken over this student protest movement. We have to go in and we have to sick the rabid dogs of the state. Think about that. New York City and the state chose to use multiple millions of dollars worth of resources instead of stopping crime. Okay. Instead of that, they did a show of force. They said, no, this is a fascist police state, actually. How dare you say anything mean about Israel? We will kill you. We will pack you up. We will arrest you.
Yesterday, before police showed up here at Columbia, students received a shelter-in-place warning. Hours later, we saw dozens upon dozens of protesters in zip ties taken into city and police buses as their peers, protesters, and even faculty members cheered them on from the outside. Dozens of NYPD officers in riot gear entered Columbia University around 9 p.m. Some through locked gates, others seen here coming through a second-floor window of the building occupied by demonstrators Tuesday night. The officers entered Hamilton Hall at the request of the university. While inside, police cleared barricades, conducted multiple arrests, eventually clearing the building. Police also began clearing the tent encampment that had been the symbol of the protest on campus for nearly 2 weeks. Then NYPD moved further north in Harlem towards the City College campus. We were there when dozens of officers breached a gate to clear the encampment and began arresting protesters.
Yeah, I mean, of course they were doing IDF shit last night. New York mayor vows to bring back what he's learned from Israel police back to the NYPD, which, by the way, this is from August 23rd, 2023. But let me tell you something. The IDF already trains the NYPD. IDF doesn't just train the NYPD. The IDF trained every single local police department in this damn nation, all the way from New York City down to a bum part of Iowa, on anti-terror initiatives. Kettling and corralling was the IDF tactic early on that our riot police also took on and used so adequately on every Black Lives Matter protest, as you saw in the 2020 BLM protests. Okay? Post 9/11, IDF trained every single police, pretty much every single local police force. Why the IDF, though, you might ask? Well, they're the best at dealing with terrorists. Anyway. So it's far before Eric Adams and his dick riding of Israel that this situation, this collaboration was very much in existence. Yeah. I love this. It will be interesting to learn how many of those arrested in Hamilton Hall in Columbia are actually students. Yeah, it turns out they were all students, dickhead, but it didn't stop you from saying, interesting. And it didn't stop your asshole panelists on CNN from making these assertions all goddamn night. These are the people directly responsible for your parents, for your mom and dad and your grandparents, for having these like insane ideas that there's outside agitators on college campuses really pissing off these students, really getting them wired up, getting them ready to act in scary ways and doing anti-Semitism, none of which is true, by the way. It's all just bullshit fabrications from mainstream media to do what mainstream media has always done. Demand that this exact same thing that we watched unfold last night happen over and over and over again, because how dare they? How dare these students speak out against Israel? Israel is small bean. Israel is powerful lion. But Israel also neurodivergent and minor. Israel, best nation on the planet. Israel, best democracy. Most moral army on the planet. Israel always somehow finds themselves to be in the crosshairs of scary, rabid Muslims that are operating on anti-Jewish sentiment. Of course, Israel has to defend itself. Israel must defend itself. These students, kill them. Kill them all. Kill them all right now. Kent State. Kent State. Kent State. That's all we heard from mainstream media for weeks and weeks. And now that it's happening, now that it's unfolding, now that the New York City spent millions of dollars bringing in the fattest, most divorced, roided out dipshits with batons and sometimes even live ammunition, as a matter of fact, with guns into Hamilton Hall to brutally arrest and suppress 300 total students from both CCNY in collaboration with CUNY, the City University of New York, and also at Columbia University. Your forced anger is so cringe. Thank you. Chill, bruh. I know, you're right. I should be covering this with a smile. I should not be getting upset about this. I must be faking my anger. I must be faking my anger. I can't possibly be angry that everything that I'm seeing and everything that I've said is going to happen is happening over and over again. And yet the media never actually turns around and goes, hey guys, my bad. Sorry for yelling. Sorry for yelling, chatter. I apologize. You're right. I should not be so mad about Anderson Cooper and every other trusted name in journalism and news basically bricking your stupid parents' brains every goddamn night with this bullshit propaganda that is so easily dismissed. It is so easy. And yet, nobody sees it. You mean Hins Hall? Man, shut the fuck up. I already used both, okay? Don't do this smarmy, rad-libby bullshit to me either, okay? Shut the fuck up, goddamn 34-month subscriber. You mean Hins Hall? I know, dude. I know. I've been using both, okay? I've been using both of those terms, you stupid radlibs. Oh my God. Oh my God. Aesthetics all the way.
Dozens more students were loaded onto city buses and detained by the end of the night. Many faculty members were outside, like this professor we spoke to, who was visibly upset over seeing so many students handcuffed.
I'm just devastated that this has happened to every single campus in this country. By letting the military in, by letting the police in, these are just students.
At a press conference before police arrived at the college,
The students were calling it Hamilton on the radio last night too. Radlibs are so shitty. It's just like unproductive. That's not the point, okay? Yes, I know why it's called Hind Hall. I've talked about it as well. And I go between both. And I also always mention why it's called that, while simultaneously also, for context, so that people understand exactly what hall this is, use Hamilton Hall, especially when referencing the historic significance of Hamilton Hall. Shut the fuck up, 40-month subscribers. Oh my God. Your concern trolling in this circumstance is simply coming out of a narcissistic desire, okay? It's like when someone has they, she on their bio, and I call them she, which is inside of their preferred pronouns, and you go, they! It's they! It's not just they! Suck my dick! You just want to be heard, okay? Anyway, they are not students, they are Hamas. Why don't they understand? Yeah, dude, you're right. Yeah. No, you're totally right. These students are also Hamas. Who isn't Hamas? If you are an unconditional, if you are an unconditional supporter of Israel at this point, you are just literally hallucinating in public. And it's really damaging because, like, so much of the organs of media, so much of the organs of the state are basically reaffirming your mania. They keep consistently giving you like little bits and pieces here and there to constantly say, no, you're not hallucinating. No, you're right. You're right. These 18-year-old students are actually Hamas. You're right. They're at least Hamas adjacent. I mean, maybe they are Hamas. See, they have tunnels under Hamilton Hall. You know, Hamas is everywhere. It's everywhere, all around. Top of the hour, 3-minute Hamas break. Yeah. You have to defend yourself against that, dude, by subscribing for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. That's it. Here's the 3-minute ad break now.
College campuses, Mayor Eric Adams blamed outside agitators for the chaos and urged student protesters to call it quits.
We cannot and will not allow what should be a peaceful gathering to turn into a violent spectacle.
Bro, you did that. Your rabid dogs in the NYPD did that. There's a great way to make sure that that doesn't happen, okay? I do want to kind of cover Hamilton Hall's significance throughout history because I feel like a lot of people don't understand. Like, the students in 1968 held a dean hostage. They took over Hamilton Hall for weeks. In 1985, they took it over, I believe, for 3 weeks, as a matter of fact. In I forget which college this was in, but there were demonstrations done by black students that were armed during the civil rights movement. Like, we're talking about shit. We're talking about stuff like our current student protest movement is so peaceful in comparison to how much more radical these students used to be. Did they try to paint the protesters of the Vietnam War as sympathizers of the Vietnamese army? Of course they did. They kept saying these guys are Viet Cong supporters. And then obviously there was a steady flow of propaganda talking about how the atrocities committed by the Viet Cong. Yeah, of course they did that. Remember Jane Fonda? Jane Fonda went and talked to the North Vietnamese forces. They called her Hanoi Jane. They despised her. There are still T-shirts and jackets that say, "I'll never forgive Jane Fonda. I won't forgive. I won't forget. F you, Hanoi Jane. F you, Jane Fonda." Like, people over the age of like 80 still carry resentment towards Jane Fonda. They wanted to kill her. Yeah, this Vietnam vet ain't Fonda Jane. So yeah, I was at VFW not 3 years ago, and it still had Hanoi Jane piss targets in the urinals. Yep.
That serves no purpose.
Wesleyan University President Michael Roth says he has not cleared the encampments at his campus, but he thinks students' efforts should be on legislators instead.
It's the White House that can make a difference on the ground in Gaza and in Israel. And so I think getting our political energies.
Yeah. Forgive Jane Fonda when Jews forgive Hitler. That's a real patch, baby. Yeah, dude. Jane Fonda wronged you in the same way that Hitler wronged the Jews. That's true. Like, I just want you to understand how insane we can get, okay? I need you to understand how insane we can get and how insane we have always been throughout American history. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because, like, the mania that you experience, the mania that you see all around you with all of these campus protests and the misinformation that flows through mainstream media, that is by design, that is deliberate, that is precisely how you have this level of animosity still being shared by everyone over the age of 75, 80 towards, like, Jane Fonda. I'm showing you this because, like, things have not changed in America. This has always been a very American attitude, and it comes from the same place of hurt. It comes from the same fascist interest. It comes from the same reactionary sentiment. Okay, here.
The year was 1968.
Let's look at the Columbia University protests.
War raged on. Liberal uprisings took hold in Czechoslovakia. The civil rights movement intensified. Across the globe, people cried out for radical change. In the U.S., these cries rang out across many college campuses as students pushed for civil rights and demanded an end to the Vietnam War and the draft. These sentiments translated into activism and demonstrations, many of which ended in violence. Such was the case at Columbia University in April 1968. In February 1968, Columbia University began construction on an $11.6 million gymnasium in Morningside Park, part of the Harlem neighborhood that houses Columbia's main campus in New York City. Almost immediately, there was objection. Students and activists argued the gym discriminated against Harlem residents by evicting and displacing them to build the structure. The gym would be built with a main entrance that catered to students and university affiliates. But local Harlem residents, many of whom were Black, could use part of the facilities but would have to enter through a back door in the basement. Many interpret this as segregation and racism. Among the gym's fiercest opponents was Columbia's Student Afro-American Society, founded in 1964. members of the SAS labeled the construction project Jim Crow and enlisted help from other black activists in the Harlem community and throughout New York. While the SAS worked to halt construction of the gym, another campus organization, Students for a Democratic Society, or the SDS, was building
It's really f***ed up, man. It's really f***ed up, these students.
a case against the university's apparent involvement in the Vietnam War. In 1967, one SDS member, Bob Feldman, found documents in the school library showing ties between the university and a think tank involved in weapons research for the U.S. Department of Defense, known as the Institute for Defense Analyses, or IDA. Many saw this as the university directly supporting the war in Vietnam. In the spring of 1968, the SDS, led by then-chairman Mark Rudd, organized a rally against the university. Their rallying cry? Students would not attend a university that exploited black people and developed weapons designed to kill the Vietnamese. On April 23, 1968, several hundred Columbia students gathered in front of Lowe Memorial Library, the university's main administrative building. They attempted to take their message inside to University President Grayson L. Kirk, but the administration locked the building down. So the group marched to the gymnasium construction site and tore down part of the fencing that surrounded it. The police moved to disperse the crowd, arresting one student in the process. Then protesters staged a sit-in at an administrative building, preventing Dean Henry Coleman from leaving his office. They presented a list of 6 demands. 2 included stopping construction on the gym and severing ties with the IDA. The students promised not to leave until their demands were met. The students eventually released Dean Coleman the next day, but their numbers had grown upwards of 400.
They had a
They
hostage.
took over the low.
They took a Dean hostage, bro. Come on. Come on. Like, the students now, the things that the students now are that are doing, that are protesting against, like, Israel are so much kinder. They are pacifists, okay, in comparison to what these dudes were doing.
Library and 3 additional buildings on campus. Students and community members sympathetic to the cause brought.
But the dean's different than a janitor, bro. That's bullshit. They didn't keep they did not hold a janitor hostage. That was media propaganda, dude. Get the f out of here. Oh yeah, they held the janitor hostage, and then yet the janitor immediately left. How did that happen? Was the janitor how did they hold the janitor hostage? Number 1. Number 2, is he a master of kung fu? Did he actually fight his way out? Is that how he got out? The janitor was there for 10 minutes. You think that was being held hostage or being held back for a brief moment while they set up the protections?
Brought food and other supplies. The university tried to negotiate an end to the standoff over the next several days, but the administration refused to promise amnesty to the protesters, and no agreement was reached. Over the course of the week, the numbers of protesters grew, until finally on April 30th, police, acting on orders from school president Kirk, moved in and forcefully cleared all 5 buildings. Amid the chaos, more than 100 students, faculty members, and police were injured, and 712 students were arrested. Motivated by the actions of the police,
Yeah, the thugs broke in and beat the shit out of and violently apprehended students on the same exact day, 56 years ago. Or 54? I don't know. I don't know math. I did the math last night on my Instagram story. I think it was 56 years ago. Same exact day, 56 years ago, baby. April 30th, 1968.
thousands of Columbia students went on strike, and the campus shut down for the rest of the semester. The university's June commencement ceremony was held off campus instead of at its traditional location on Lowe Plaza. More than 300 graduating students walked out in protest to hold their own counter-commencement ceremony. Eventually, Columbia University met the protesters' major demands. Gym construction was permanently suspended.
What? Were the universities supporting the war financially then, like they are now? Yes, of course. Their involvement, the difference is that the involvement of American institutions of higher learning with genocidal state apparatuses has become increasingly more prominent over the years is basically calcified. And it's not just that, it's like a multiple prong attack. What I mean by this is, like, you have, especially when it comes to Israel, you have a lot of donors who are just very openly like, if you don't do this, if you don't immediately pack up these students, like, I'm just going to not give you millions of dollars any longer. Robert Kraft openly stated, if you don't pack up these kids, okay, in between getting rub and tugs at massage parlors in Florida, Robert Kraft turned around and was like, hold on, I'm jerking my shit off right now by someone who was trafficked. But let me tell you something, okay? Once I'm done getting my shit jerked off, okay, I'm going to come at you real quick, Columbia, with some shit, okay? You better destroy these students. Anyway, yeah, I'm getting my shit zerked off right now. Let me tell you something, okay? Get my shit zerked off. But when I'm done, when I nut, by the time I nut, I better not see a single goddamn pro-Palestinian sentiment being expressed on college campus. That's what he was doing, okay? Didn't he almost go to prison for that? Yeah, dude. You think we put billionaires in prison in this goddamn country? It's an entire nation designed around specifically doing the opposite of that. Anyway, the point is, professor pinned on the ground being arrested at UV-Madison, asking for the police to leave the student alone. We're getting a taste of Trump's America if elected. It's just cognitive dissonance. I think that's why it's such a common thing for people to say about, like, socialism in action. You know what I mean? Like, they'll just show you, like, obvious instances of capitalism destroying people's lives and then point to it and be like, this is what it would be like if socialism took hold over America. And it's like, bro, you're living in the situation. We are so far removed from socialism, big dog. Okay, Farley, calm down. Farley! Farley! God damn it. No, my dad just walked in and Farley's going nutty mode. Are you still voting for Biden? Bitch, when did I say I am? When did I say that? I'll tell you who I'm not voting for, Donald Trump. Doesn't mean I'm voting for Biden. Before I forget. I thought a good propaganda framing, Chad and Hasan. Let me know if I'm cooking. You can't protest genocide nowadays with how woke everyone is. That's silly. Anyway, I thought Farley and your dad vibed yesterday. They did. But Farley's a bit of a fair weather fan. You know what I mean? He forgets quickly. He has a short memory. Little man. All right, let's finish this.
And the school ended its relationship with the IDA. Columbia also began to revise long-established and long-criticized policies and formed a university senate. And after resisting numerous requests for his resignation, University President Kirk announced his retirement before the beginning of the next school year. In 1968, the Columbia protests were just one example of our nation grappling with injustices at home and abroad. And others caught on. Validated by what many saw as legitimate and successful means of expressing grievances, demonstrations spread to hundreds of schools and cities around the world.
Yep. Farley is Caroline and Will's dog, yes, for those of you who don't know. Anyway. Farley's the little angel. He absolutely is not. He's a cutie pie, but he certainly is not an angel. Let me tell you something, okay? That little man is a little bit of a demon, all right? He's a little dog. He's a little guy. He tried to sleep in my bed last night, and we don't allow, in this household, dogs to be sleeping on beds, unfortunately. I know, it's fascist. The irony of this on Columbia's website, yeah, I know. We covered all this yesterday, but yeah, Columbia's webpage discussing its regret for calling in the police to arrest students in 1968 is displaying a warning about limited access due to NYPD on campus arresting students. Incredible irony. We read this article. We read this perspective on 1968 last night. You're missing out on epic cuddles? No, I'm not. I do rarely allow. I do sometimes allow. Huh? Pick you. My dad said posture check. Dana Bash. Today, destruction, violence, and hate overtake college campuses across the country with Jewish students feeling unsafe in our schools. It is unacceptable and harkening back to 1930s in Europe. Our Inside Politics show open here. Another glaringly obvious instance of propaganda. They are losing an entire generation's confidence in. All right. Told Pops, they said thanks. Okay, let's I also wanted to show you this Angus Johnston is a history of student is a professor of the history of student protests, and apparently he took some calls from cynical assholes yesterday.
Past and present. Our guest is history.
So I want to briefly look at this a little bit.
Student activism, and Mr. Johnston, first on the scope of these protests over the war in Gaza. How do they compare to other student protests of the 21st century? And how do they compare to Vietnam protests of the 60s and 70s?
Well, we're nowhere near the level of scale of the Vietnam War protests yet. But the thing that's extraordinary to me about this wave of protest is not just the number of protests that we're seeing, not just the number of students who are participating in them, but the incredible pace of acceleration that we've seen. These have gone from something fairly small to something that is sweeping the country and continuing to grow in the space of about 2 weeks.
And why the timing of this? Obviously, the war in Gaza has been going on since early October. Why is this all happening now, and why have these past 2 weeks been such a focal point?
Well, it's clear that
I think what needs to happen is that beyond the students, beyond SJP, beyond JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, Students for Justice in Palestine, and beyond YDSA, there needs to be more momentum from the broader student body. But also on top of that, there needs to be more momentum from unions that come in to show support, whether it be grad student unions, whether it be faculty unions across the board, and just other unions as well. It's just that right now there is a lot of momentum on this front. There is a lot of momentum on this front, and we must not let up. We must not cave. We must not capitulate. That the goal, obviously, the goal, obviously, from the state, the goal, obviously, from the universities is to violently suppress these demonstrations. UAW 4811 announced that they're going to go support the California students. Hell yeah. I hate the media's insane pro-Israel coverage so much. It's even made my mom a little anti-Semitic. I've had to explain to her the difference between Judaism and Zionism multiple times now, and luckily she's starting to understand. I used your Christian Zionist takes, and that helped a lot, so thanks. Yes. You should always do that. You should always describe to anyone and everyone in this time when people are developing anti-Semitic tendencies as a consequence of like Israel consistently trying to shield themselves from criticism by channeling Judaism in the most cynical way possible, in the most disgusting way possible, that it absolutely has nothing to do with Judaism whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, Jewish students who are anti-Zionists are at the forefront of these protests and are overrepresented in the arrests, are overrepresented in the harm that actually the state conducts on Jewish student populations. Remember, Jewish revolutionaries have always been at the forefront of social justice historically. It is actually the exact opposite. While Israel desperately tries, and very successfully, in my opinion, tries to say that they represent the interests of all Jewish people around the planet and marries their unjustifiable violent atrocities with the long history and culture of Judaism, which is gross. It's gross to do so. It is anti-Semitic to do so. That's exactly what the Nazis say. You must not forget, Kent State, 3 out of the 4 students that were murdered by the National Guard in Kent State were Jewish. Jewish students are also overrepresented, like I said, in the arrests. Since October 7, I've had a shit ton of anti-Zionist voices on this broadcast, many of whom are American Jews. Some of them are anti-Zionist Israeli Jews. They are some of the loudest voices against Israel. Minimizing their impact, making them seem like they're tokens, is one of the grossest, most anti-Semitic things you can do. Jews across the board, let's not forget, Jews across the board, 15 million of them on this planet, okay, are not even a fraction of the Christian Zionist movement in this country, okay? Christian Zionists in this country, those who believe in a theological reason for Israel to be a Jewish ethno-state because they believe in Armageddon. They believe in the rapture occurring, Jesus Christ coming back to earth, like anime shit. They are far larger than the number of Jews on the planet, okay? anti-Zionist and Zionist Jews alike. This is why I always say, when people go, Zionist Jews own the U.S. government, yes or no? No, of course not, dumb. Of course not. Do you not listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth? There are a shit ton more Christian Zionists in this country than there are Jewish Zionists. Okay? I do not know if you are willingly or unwillingly channeling fascist propaganda here. If every single Jew in the United States of America tomorrow collectively decided that they are all loud and proud anti-Zionists, America's actions in Israel would not change. Okay? Evangelicals have a broad, outsized, evangelicals in this country have phenomenal outsized political power. Okay? White evangelical Protestants specifically love becoming a Nazi just through weapons grade stupidity. Exactly. However, this is absolutely a problem. This is why anti-Semitism, real anti-Semitism, of course, increases anytime Israel does some shit like this. Okay? And because people lack critical thinking skills, they just see like Israel doing this and then repping the Star of David, repping Judaism while doing this, and claiming that they're doing this for Judaism, claiming that they're doing this for Jewish people across the board. And then the media literally also repeats that propaganda. And then the media also cynically weaponizes real and much more fake instances of anti-Semitism, such as the ADL claiming that anytime they hear someone say from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, is anti-Semitic incident, which leads to anti-Semitic incidents rising by 7,000% or whatever and the media just unconditionally reports that as though it's like, without uncritically reports that as though that is actually completely valid. When people see that reality, they go, well, what the fuck's going on here? This is such a wonderful opportunity for the fascist Nazis in the United States of America. Okay? A phenomenal opportunity for the opportunist fascists to be like, see, look at what the Jews are doing.
Columbia University's decision 2 weeks ago on Thursday to send in the police and shut down their encampment really sparked a response among students around the country. And so we began to see a lot of reactions to that. And then as it got more media attention, as people started hearing about them, they continued to snowball. And we've seen that a lot of times in the past, including in the 60s and even earlier. But there seems to be a particular level of intensity of the student response around the country this time. And I have some theories about that, but I don't think we fully understand it just yet.
What are your theories?
Well, clearly, this is an issue that a lot of students feel very strongly about. We are in an era where images from war and violence across the world are things that we not only see in our living rooms on television, but we see on our screens on social media and so on. I also, though, think that we need to start thinking about the fact that this is the post-COVID generation of American students. Just about every undergrad on American campuses right now are students who started college after the COVID lockdowns. And so this is really the first post-pandemic or post-lockdown wave of American student protest. And I think that suggests really interesting things about what's going on.
How much did you watch what happened last night? New York Police Department clearing the students out of Hamilton Hall in Columbia. At the same time, overnight, seeing the violence between protesters and counter-protesters at UCLA. After several hours, LA Police Department moves in to separate the two of them.
Yeah, I was watching in New York and listening to the Columbia student radio station. I found an old FM radio that I had tucked away somewhere. The images that, and certainly the Columbia images and the City College arrests and violence were really troubling. But the thing that really struck me was what was going on at UCLA, where the encampment at UCLA was essentially raided by counter-protesters who were engaging in what seemed like really aggressive acts of violence. It took hours for the police to be called in, and then once the police were called in, according to the LA Times this morning, they stood and watched as counter-protesters were firing off some sort of tear gas kind of a thing, or pepper spray, firing off.
They were using bear mace, the counter-protesters, the Zionist agitators, okay? All the Beverly Hills Persians went to UCLA campus. All the Bel Air and Beverly Hills Persians got up in arms, okay? Don't even go to the school at all. Got up in arms, went over there to beat the shit out of the UCLA campus students. Yeah, they used bear mace, skunk spray, and fireworks as they screamed, "It's time for a second Nakba." Ironic, because so many Persian Jews oftentimes get shit on by the American state because they look a little too much like they're Muslim. And yet here they are doing West Bank style pogroms.
Fireworks and engaging in physical altercations with the demonstrators as well.
In terms of what's happening on these campuses, what we're seeing, you mentioned the images, the social media images. It was a caller in our first segment of the Washington Journal who said, in the 60s, we weren't waving Vietnamese flags. We were waving peace flags. And she, I think it was a she, didn't understand why all these protesters at the universities today are waving Palestinian flags. In terms of the images that we're seeing and how it compares to the past, what are you finding?
Well, I think that we really do misremember a lot about the 1960s. The cultural memory that we have of what was going on in the 60s is in many cases very, very different from what actually happened. During the Vietnam War protests, there were people waving North Vietnamese flags. There were students chanting, "Ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, Viet Cong is going to win," and hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? And famously, American student organizers went to North Vietnam and toured some of these sites. This is why a lot of people, including I'm sure a lot of your viewers, are still angry at Jane Fonda today. She did a photo op with an anti-aircraft gun. So I think the idea that that American 60s protest that was protesting violence and protesting the brutality of war was not critical of America and not finding common cause with some of the people who were on the other side is just misremembering what actually took place.
Angus Johnston is with us, history professor. It's Hostess Community College at the City University of New York. And he's with us until about 8:45. So go ahead and start calling in with your questions, your comments. Same lines as before in our previous segment. Democrats 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, Independents 202-748-8002, and then students, administrators, faculty at colleges and universities 202-748-8003. As folks are calling in, Professor Johnston, Saturday is the 54th anniversary of the Kent State massacre. We had a caller who was a freshman at Kent State on Monday on this program to talk about his experiences and how these images have brought back that experience that day. How did Kent State become such a historic tragedy?
So Kent State is actually only one of 4 campuses in the late 1960s where police officers or other law enforcement officials deputized in one way or another killed protesters or passersby. There were people killed at Berkeley in '69, at South Carolina State College in 1968, and at Jackson State just a week and a half after Kent State in 1970. Kent State, though, was significant and was transformative for a few reasons. I think one is that Kent State happened in the middle of a huge upsurge of protest in response to Nixon's decision to invade Cambodia. Many, many campuses shut down. Many, many campuses stepped back from the kind of confrontation that happened at Kent State. But in Kent State, the governor of Ohio was running for the United States Senate, and he did not want to appear weak, so he sent the National Guard onto campus. 4 students were killed, all of them well over 100 yards, several hundred yards away from the National Guard troops. And crucially, 2 of those students, by the way, were just passersby. And crucially, there was a journalist for the student newspaper who had a camera and took a bunch of photos, which were then able to be delivered to the AP and ran on the front page of newspapers all over the country the next morning, including the famous one of the woman wailing in front of behind a dead body of a fallen student that is so well known today. And then, as now, images are really powerful in shaping national coverage and national memory.
Talking with Angus Johnson this morning and taking your phone calls about the student protests, past and present. Matt is our first caller in this segment out of Falls Church, Virginia. Democrat. Matt, you're on with Professor Johnson.
Good morning, Professor Johnson. I have a comment and then a question for you. My comment is I'm not really well versed on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict long term, and I don't really have an opinion on what would be best for them, but I really look at, like, the rights for protests in this country, and it seems crazy to me, the overreaction to protesters on these college campuses. I mean, just these small groups of kids and they're being surrounded by giant hordes of police seems crazy to me. So my question for you is, do you think more college campuses are going to have protests now that this overreaction will probably lead to another reaction?
That's a great question, and I think there are 2 parts to the answer to it. One is clearly the crackdowns are prompting more protests. We are seeing that spiral happening. But also, I think it's really important to remember that police have been called out and arrests have been made only in a minority of the campuses where these protests are happening right now. There are a lot of campuses where the administrators have chosen either to just let the protesters be and allow them to continue their encampments, or to negotiate with them. At Brown, just yesterday, it was announced that they had negotiated a settlement and the students were going to step away, and there was going to be a discussion on campus about Israeli divestment in the fall. My own daughter is a student at MIT. There, the encampment, the last I heard, had been allowed to go on peacefully for more than a week. So the crackdowns that we are seeing are not inevitable. They are not something that is happening at every campus, and many campuses that are not experiencing these crackdowns are finding that they are able to continue their business and continue the semester peacefully.
Returning to Kent State for a second, you mentioned the photographs. Is it Howard Ruffner that you were referring to, who was the photographer there?
Yes, yes.
So he, in 2019, spoke about taking those photographs at an event. He was releasing a book about the photographs from Kent State in 1970. It's
UCLA. Here is okay. We're gonna talk about the UCLA protests in a second and the counter protests who went nutty mode. UCLA supply needs urgent headlamps, airsoft goggles, gas masks and respirators, skater helmets, shields, wood for barriers, knee and elbow pads, rain ponchos, canopies, utility gloves of various sizes, super bright flashlights with strobes, charged umbrellas. For medical, they need EpiPens, non-steroid inhalers, headlamps, organizational bins. For food, they need hot food for lunch, vegan food, gluten-free food, ice, no packaged food, no coffee, no bagels, no bananas, no nuts. For logistics, they need sleeping bags, AA, AAA, C and D batteries, rope, zip ties, electric or solar power generators, lotion, aquifer, and no sunscreen. Gluten-free vegan food. I mean, brother, I think it's fine. You know what I mean? They're in the heart of Los Angeles, okay? It's not that difficult. When I got pizza for the protesters at the student encampment, I also got vegan options and gluten-free options as well. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal, you know? Yes, you can Yeah, please ensure the donations are BDS compliant. You can donate to the you can donate to their link. I believe they have here, I'll see if we can find it. Very scary that this type of hardening of encampment will inevitably give credence for escalation of police response. They're trying to protect themselves. At the end of the day, you have power in numbers, and when the state very obviously stands aside and allows, and I will show you the images which will help you, I think, understand exactly what occurred last night at UCLA at the peaceful encampment overrun by counter protesters. They have a Venmo here. SJP UCLA Venmo right here. If you're outside of the state and you want to help them. Do I think counter protests will face criminal charges? If there's enough pressure, potentially. Oh, here's Karine Jean-Pierre. Okay, let's just cover the UCLA protests real quick because I feel like I'm gonna have to dive into this really quickly. But what happened at UCLA last night is obviously unconscionable. It's gross. It's disgusting. What's peaceful about this? The students are peaceful. What's not peaceful is actually the counter protesters coming in and beating the shit out of students that they can get their hands on.
Pointed in the right direction could be very powerful.
Police will now stay on campus here at Columbia until at least May 17th. Yesterday, the university said in a statement that any of the students who were inside Hamilton Hall could face expulsion. But yesterday at CUNY, I heard from a student who was saying, look, we're all here in solidarity with the suffering in Gaza, and any consequence students face is just paling in comparison. Vlad.
All right, Lilia, thank you very much.
In this hour with New York City.
Facts about my 75-year-old black father. He watches Hasan Piker literally every day. He talks mad shit about Taylor Swift constantly. That's awesome. What is this man simply too informed to not know that presidents obviously don't control how school administrators and law enforcement deal with local protests or riots? Why are these complaints not directed at local authorities law? Yeah, you're right. I said, good thing we voted for Biden so this would never happen. No, you don't understand. Biden is small bean, okay? Biden is a small bean. He has no power here, which is why he's only shit on the student protesters that are getting brutalized by the police and said that they are anti-Semitic. That's the only sentiment that he's expressed so far. Also, guys, if we don't vote for Biden, then Donald Trump is going to win. And then Donald Trump is going to do exactly the same things that Biden is doing, but much worse because he's all powerful. He's all powerful. This makes no sense. Makes no dang sense. You know, you have to vote for Biden so that Trump doesn't come in and then do the same things that Biden is doing and worse.